Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to welcome you to a significant milestone in the blockchain evidence sessions, because we're now into double figures. So this is evidence session 10, which I think is really remarkable, given the fact that we do take this seriously, and we've had a whole array of different areas that we've looked at. To get to 10 in an evidence session, all relatively well attended, with that absolute sort of passion and commitment of people in the know in various areas of blockchain, I think is a significant milestone indeed. And not to disappoint, we have two different areas that we will be looking at tonight. The first one is education, research and sport, and the second part is charities and NGOs. So we have an array of experts in the field of those two areas, and as always with these things, we will try and stick to time if possible, but we have a little bit of leeway, because we don't have Viglioteli Anderson, who's the director of the Big Innovation Centre, with us tonight. Unfortunately, she's had a small accident, so our best wishes to her with the broken arm. And if anybody doesn't know Viglioteli, you know she's tough and resilient, and she'll be back on form very soon. As always with these things, we'll allow our guest speakers to introduce themselves and to say a little bit about them and what they do. And then as we go into the Q&A, if I could ask people, please, for the benefit of everyone else in the room, just to say who they are and then ask that question to get that debate really underway. So our first panellist guest speaker tonight is Lisa Short, who is Director of Mind Shifting at Decentrl.
Hi. Good afternoon, everybody. Basically, I work at the intersection between mainstream business and the technology space. So we're to truly get the advancement of technologies like blockchain. We've got a very big piece to do to intersect them with mainstream business, and particularly the underserved, which is areas such as the SME market and the mid-tier market, and also in terms of the education space, those who are underserved by that space. So that's predominantly where I'm working at the moment.
My name is Maria Viglioteli, and I am the director of the cybersecurity director of GradBase, and we are a company that works in the UK, and it is a UK company, the first GDPR compliant company that inserts academic qualification into the blockchain, and largely we serve the educational sector, but not only academic institutions, but also professional institutions that issue academic qualification, and we enable them to securely put it on the blockchain. We operate not only in the UK, but also in Europe and in Dubai. And I will talk more about this later.
My name is Oner Avara. I'm the CEO and founder of MyNextMatch. MyNextMatch is a sports platform for the national governing bodies and international governing bodies in sports. So we provide them from the membership management tool to events management tool, particularly in their CPVs for their judges, officials. And in the center of the platform sits the digital medical passport for the athletes, the competitive athletes. I'm also a co-chair of all-party parliamentary group subcommittee, sports subcommittee, work with the Big Innovation Centre, and that's it from me.
Thank you. And if you would just go back to Lisa, if you want to give your presentation, and then we'll go back down.
Yeah. All right, well, I'm sort of going to start with just a bit of a broad introduction to start with, and probably set the scene, because I think that's critical when we're talking about education and blockchain. We all know that the fourth industrial revolution is evolving at an exponential and unprecedented pace of speed of change. It's disrupting pretty much almost every industry globally, including government, with a breadth and depth of change that heralds the transformation of entire systems. So governments, educators, business, workforce and society need to understand the changing environment. We need to be resilient to its changes, and we also need to be relentlessly and continually learning to innovate. These are new educational capacities and concepts, yet the current educational framework evolved in the 1800s. When the time and relevance to study, learn and develop capabilities were very linear and mechanistic. So it's a very different environment in which we're sitting now, in which we're talking about blockchain tonight. In terms of education, systemic change is urgently required. To bring it to the forefront, and I think it's really critical that we talk about it, that the UN and the World Economic Forum signed an agreement as of last week, and of the 6 critical areas that they named, education and skills, digital cooperation and gender equity are the 3 critical areas. So this is really important. I think in terms of the blockchain though, we do regularly hear headlines on how blockchain could transform our daily lives. At the moment though, its potential application to systemic educational reshaping doesn't feature as a priority on the national agenda and has not been widely explored to address critical need. In emerging areas of the world such as Africa and for the underserved in all our communities, harnessing its potential will be indispensable for social and economic inclusion. So tonight, basically what I've decided to do is actually broadly just base a presentation around, rather than the technical, 3 very broad areas where blockchain can have the most impact. The first is the operational or the business side of education. The second, which I believe is the most critical, is reshaping the system to be a new paradigm, and that's where we can have the most impact moving forward. And also a third area that's very much so underrated, and that's the education required about blockchain to actually shift the environment in which we sit and to bring them along on the journey. So we'll talk about the operational and business side of education first. Many people would argue that the blockchain and distributed ledger technology is arguably at its nascent and evolving stage. And I do say arguably because I don't actually think it's the technology that it's a nascent stage. I think it's more our ability to use the technology and advance it rather than the technology itself. The technology is advancing much faster than we can cope with. So in terms of education, lowering costs, introducing new revenue streams and improving operational efficiency are at the core potential from blockchain technology regardless of what industry that we're talking about. When you consider that a great number of the significant challenges faced by government and the further education sector in the UK alone relate to decreased funding in real terms, high costs of construction and new infrastructure bills and budget constraints to meet the needs of these costs, then putting reductions in costs into perspective are really critical. Now I know that Maria's going to talk about credentialing, but I'm actually going to group them together basically in terms of some of the things that are really obvious where we can actually gain massive potential from blockchain. Things like issuing and verifying credentials, assets, research, IP, authenticate and assessment competence. They're all things that we know that can be done using technologies that already exist. Block certs is one program, GradBase is another, Indoors is another. Okay, they already exist. There are key challenges and questions pertinent to these things. For example, credential issuers, and these are some of the challenges that we need to implement in education. Credential issuers need to cooperate in large numbers, so the number of institutions we have to have need to cooperate. Education public policy would need to be modified massively to reconfigure an educational system. And the importance of common language across all of them is really important as well. So there are significant challenges there. The questions that I would pose though is who's going to act now and do something about it, because we have the technology, we just haven't got the drive and the capacity to actually implement change, and that's government's role to lead that. We can also have institutions advocating and using technology that already exists for making and accepting payments, and that can even be right down to student debt, paying anything on the supply chain, financial aid when a student needs it, fulfilling minimum credit requirements, a GPA being connected to that. And that's technology we already have. We don't have to reinvent it. We just have to actually do something about using it. The other areas that we can, and again I'm going through these fairly quickly because I want to move on to the second part. We can have sovereign identity. That's a key area in terms of blockchain where every single individual in the world should have a sovereign identity and a data wallet that actually has the educational capacity of their lifetime captured in that wallet. We do have the capacity to have infrastructure security. We also have the capacity to have decentralised management of records and data that have interoperability with other systems. We have capacity to interoperate with cloud and virtual storage. We can also have institutions starting to have energy and smart institutional management. There are peer-to-peer blockchain solutions for power solutions and cutting costs at institutional organisations that are totally being ignored at the moment. Libraries, distributed ledger technology can help libraries expand their services by building an enhanced metadata archive where we can actually start to have community libraries that are global and access to amazing resources. We can have smart contracts for learning and assessment strategies. We can have smart contracts for supply chain, both internal and external, so between learners and educational institutions, or between employees and staff of educational institutions, or for anybody that's external to the organisation. That can significantly reduce costs and increase efficiencies. Clearly, the trustworthy of blockchain records should not be confused, though, with the quality or the value of their contents, because it's only as good as the inputs that they receive. So if we're talking about a smart contract, it's only as good as the content that all of us put into it. It is still a piece of technology that will do what we want it to do, but we have to be able to put that good content into it. And of course, that means that we've got to shift our mindset. I want to move on to the second part, which is reshaping the system and setting new pedagogy and andragogical communities. But these are the operational changes that will, operational changes such as the ones that I mentioned before will not lead to a revolution in education. We are just fixing a system, an existing system that is not fit for purpose, does not deliver on the future of learning and the future of work. It's just making it more efficient and more cost effective. There is an advantage to that though, because it does mean that whilst we're making the existing system cost effective and more efficient, it gives us time, opportunity and resources to develop a concurrent system that will in fact start to meet some of the learning outcomes and the requirements that we need moving forward. Currently, we do have institutions that are rooted in effectiveness and retrospective justification. So a lot of the tools that are being used for blockchain are basically justifying outcomes that are retrospective. They're not actually starting to measure the capacity that we have to move forward. So real potentials and real solutions do actually exist that's out there. So this is not pie in the sky stuff. This is stuff that's actually happening out there. And at the very end, I know Fernando asked me to suggest ways that we think moving forward that the government can participate in. So I'm just going to talk about three sorts of areas. If we had a system where learners, so if every single person in this room and every single person that you know is a learner in the system, had a verified set of credentials and digital assets around their learning built on a blockchain, they needn't wait for a qualification to begin earning money. Employers or other educators can query the blockchain, for example, for people with a particular skill set and combination of skills to fit into a workplace. And they can actually complete that project in that workplace and they can apply a value to what they've actually, the skill that they've applied and also the value of their learning. So there's actually a return on investment for the institution that provides the education, but there's also a value applied for the individual who's obtained those skills, and more importantly, their skills that will actually be applied in the workforce. Likewise, human resource personnel will be able to calculate the return on their training and development investment. So instead of it being a cost, it becomes an investment. So we've actually flipped the model from being a cost to government to being an investment. Second example, the work of developing rigorous, valid and reliable assessments is long-standing. However, the issue of scalability is untouched. So until we can scale assessment and it can be developed through education, education itself is not scalable because we can't measure learning if we can't measure and use assessment. Establishing partnerships and synergistic technology ecosystems with other technologies such as VR, AR, AI can deliver both immersive learning and assessment capture that in live time verifies all aspects of multi-dimensional competence and records these on a blockchain learning ledger. The capacity to broaden the learning competence to include values-based skills for synergy and engaging in collaborative partnerships is absolutely moonshot. It also means that the challenges of moderation, validation and inadequate numbers of expert educators can be mitigated and delivered to millions of learners globally, particularly those who are marginalised. The flow-on effect for talent pool, eliminating cumbersome systems for developing new courses and career paths is immense. The third one is the curation of learning content that's relevant to the coalescence of the transversal skills that we need to move forward in the 21st century. They are very different to the set of skills that we had when we were at school. Resilience, creativity, ability to manage change, those sorts of skills, entrepreneurship, social entrepreneurship are critical. But currently, under the systems that we have now, because those are intangible skills, it's very difficult for us to measure them. When we're using a blockchain and we're using things like immersive learning, we can actually capture those skill sets and those behaviours. We can actually have them recorded in live time on a blockchain learning ledger, and at the same time that they're recorded on a learning ledger for an organisation or an institution, that same data can go into a data wallet that the individual has a sovereign identity to and an ownership to. That can also, of course, be then connected to employment and a whole range of other skills and tasks. So immersive learning experiences can now capture things like explicit verification, that things like environment, GPS locations, we can get tone of voice, we can get all of those things that can be captured in immersive learning and immediately be verified and locked on a blockchain as being a skill that I've actually demonstrated in real time in a real work experience. From the point of view of the employer, their argument is the education institutions are not delivering the skills that they require. The system is failing them. So similarly, one of the challenges of reshaping an education system that is not fit for purpose and has what we call a broadcast model is ensuring that the broadcasters, in other words, the educators, the trainers, the assessors, the teachers themselves, actually have relevant and are engaging in the same learning environment. So nearly all of those have to participate in professional development, and learning is done these days in many cases socially and collaboratively. But again, there is no way in the existing system that we have we can use AI, but that just puts it back onto another form of database. It doesn't verify a skill set in real time and indelibly and immutably reported on somebody's individual learning ledger or wallet. The other thing that can come from the social and collaborative learning is that we can also add a value to that, and we can tokenise the value of learning. If we can tokenise the value of learning and give it an equatable value in the economy, then it means that we can actually have people earning to learn. And that means, finish this one. That means that we can actually include those who can't afford education. Could go on for many more, but that's the button.
A very good place then, can't afford education. We've been talking about costs and efficiency.
Correct.
Hopefully give access to that. So thank you for that very comprehensive overview. Maria.
So first of all, I'd like to say thank you very much for inviting me. It's a great honor to be here. I've attended several sessions here, and I'm really happy to be here and to be able to talk about blockchain and education and what we are doing as a UK company that brings UK innovation, which we are very proud about. A very brief presentation about GradBase so that it's easy to understand where our big vision will lead us. So we essentially insert academic qualification on the blockchain. So when in the old days, or still now in fact, one would like to say in the old days you would receive a paper certificate, today you still receive a paper certificate, but with our system, universities and other educational institutions will be able to actually insert a cryptographic digest of the data on the blockchain effectively, and enable then whoever wants to, typically employers or other institutions that would like to recruit the candidate or the student, they would be able to actually verify that that qualification has been inserted. And so that's really, it may seem relatively small, but it's very, very important. And I would like to tell you exactly why this is important. It's actually extremely important. First of all, because it touches something that is part of the fabric of society, and that is employment. How do we employ people and how we get people on employment? And fundamentally because it solves problems that around education that, as Lisa very clearly said earlier, need to be tackled. I would like to start with the first one, which is the most obvious one, but there are others as well. The first one is actually fraud. And fraud happens at different levels, and this is why blockchain that enables to record trustworthy and verified records is very good for. So who perpetrates a fraud and who is the victim of the fraud? So typically the perpetrator are people who would like to somehow have a better degree than they actually have. And so this kind of fraud is about, as a total value of 1 billion worldwide. And if you like to have some interesting numbers, I can tell you that, for example, in the US, there are more fake PhDs than real ones. I can go on and tell you a little bit of more stories that, for example, a few, in the Times educational supplement a couple of years ago published that actually some fake degrees from Oxford were actually issued in Oxford by a bunch of clearly fraudsters who thought they could make quite a good money by giving people some fake degrees. That was quite embarrassing. So really, university could think about deploying our platform as a risk management tool. And as Lisa said, and I would like really to emphasize that, it brings down a lot of cost using the blockchain and brings a lot of benefit not only to the university but also to the student who now have the opportunity to have a digital qualification that can be easily shared through social media. Again, our students are changing. They are not simply going around with their degree and frame it on their bedroom, but they want to share it on social media. But more importantly, as again you said very clearly, employers have the opportunity to actually have this degree verified very quickly. Because one of the biggest problems for employers is really once they see this CV, could they trust it? That's really, really an important question. And so that's really one of the problems that we solve. We don't work only with academic qualification, that's quite interesting. We also work with professional educational institutions. For example, continuous professional development accreditation companies, they are on our platform. Why is that? One would think that that fraudster would like to create fake degrees from Oxford or Imperial or other universities, but and actually professional qualifications are ultimately not that important. But if we think about today how we learn and how we operate, for example, a doctor, typically a doctor needs to maintain a certain level of qualification, and they do that through a number of professional experiences that then need to be certified to maintain to ensure that they have a certain level of skills. Now, there are various reasons why those things could either get lost or they could be somehow falsified, or anything could happen. But more importantly, here comes a very crucial element where the blockchain is particularly good, and this is about compliance. Everybody is happy when things go well. Okay, but when there is an accident, everybody frets about how to prove compliance. How do we know that the doctor really had the degree? How do we know that the doctor was really had the right skills at that particular time? Again, the blockchain offers a great opportunity and a reduction of costs to prove compliance in these particular cases. Okay. And now I would like to bring to the another stakeholder that is really important. Those are the students. Why would students want this verified qualification? We have recently been working with a big university in Switzerland, and we made a big study among students. Students love digital qualification, but somehow it has to mean something for them as well. Otherwise, if the qualification, if the certification does not represent the study, then it's meaningless for them as well. It's a devaluation of their professional life. So having the opportunity to put qualification on the blockchain actually provides the assurance to students that their qualification is meaningful. So we use blockchain to enable university to issue safe qualification, to enable employer to securely verify qualification, to enable students to be very proud about their qualifications. That's really important. What else do we do? I think it's very important what Lisa said earlier. Our platform brings together all the stakeholders that I have just mentioned: students, recruiters or employers, and professional and institutional qualification, to do exactly the vision that you have just mentioned. So everybody has an opportunity to be at the same table, to see the data, and to actually interact with the data in a meaningful way, lowering the amount of time that the data needs to pass around, and also the cost of this passage. So effectively turning problems into opportunities. Okay, so that's really important. I would like to say a few words about our direct experience with various institutions and countries. So we are a member of the IOC, the Institute of Coding, which is a government institution for 40 million to improve the digital skills in the UK. Okay, and we are working with various universities. Universities are really interested in opening up, but they have difficulties, as many heavily regulated or relatively regulated sectors, they tend to be very cautious. And the fear of university is absolutely related to GDPR and privacy compliance. They don't want to give out data. And quite rightly so, by the way. I mean, there is no way you should really be giving data out. And this is one of the good points of what we do. We don't keep data on our database. We have a clever way of ensuring GDPR. We have thought about that very, very early. But the biggest problem that we are facing with university, in particular with academic institutions, is really a mentality. While professional institutions do get it and they want to operate with us because they can see the benefit that the candidates and the recruiter will have, and the benefits that brings to them in terms of compliance, universities sometimes have a tendency to wanting to do more, but actually feeling some kind of barriers. And so here what the government could do, really. If we look at finance, right, which is a heavily regulated environment, what the FCA and the Bank of England have done are a sort of sandbox, an opportunity to innovate. And what they really would like to advocate is an educational sandbox. Universities are very able. I was an academic. I worked at Imperial College for many years. It has been a great pleasure to be there. I know what innovation in academia is. It's research, and we have produced great things in the UK. But there isn't an idea of innovate from the institution and organizational point of view. There is a barrier, there is a tendency to do, well, we have done this up to date in this way, and let's continue like that. And there is also not an idea of working together as a sector, because the university is a very particular organization, especially in the UK. It's not quite governmental and it's not quite private. So it's a sort of there in between, and has to manage a lot of stakeholders. So the idea of operating together is rather foreign. So it would be really fantastic if the government could do a sort of educational sandbox where university can, from an operational point of view, actually innovate themselves. There is a mandate from the Department of Education to enforce digitalization, because obviously this means scalability and better services, absolutely. But there is no really a same mandate to innovate. And that would be really, really important for, not only for blockchain, but for the future of the UK innovation, for the UK. I would like just to add another thing, if I have the time. And that is that actually putting qualification on the blockchain is not only for the benefit of the university, but is also for the benefit of the economy. I worked a lot in Africa and in West Africa, and one of the biggest problems in immigration is always, even when we are talking about really intelligent immigration, so skills that we really want. So I have worked in West Africa where I was leading some work on land registry there using blockchain, and I met a lot of very intelligent people, very competent people that I would have liked to bring in the UK. Really, bringing them to the UK would not have benefited them, it would have benefited the UK given the shortage of digital skills that we have today. But it's a real challenge. How do we recognize the skill of people if the certification is not accurate and if we cannot trust the certification? So our ambition as a company is really to create a global trustworthy registry where we can work, where university and employers can work together and can really create a better job market and a fairer job market.
Anne-Marie, you'll be rest assured to know that the reason we set this up so the government can take all of those messages on board and move forward. Our third speaker on this particular subject is Oner Avara, so we'll let you go through the sporting element of blockchain.
Thank you very much. I can see a lot of parallels with Mario's kind of industry. In sports, it's not much different than any other learning institutions. So this past Sunday we celebrated the 225th anniversary of the International Olympic Committee in Lausanne, Switzerland, with the inauguration of their innovative, technology-savvy and eco-friendly Olympic House. This will be one of the most sustainable buildings in the entire world. 125 years ago, do you think the forefathers of the IOC, not the same IOC, could have envisaged the importance and necessity for the sport to embrace technology? Today, sports organizations and federations are expected, actually are mandated to embrace the cohabitation of sports and technology. Yet, constantly, we as insiders, specialists and fans can see that there is still so much more which can be done to tackle logistical and governance issues through the sustained implementation of sports-specific technology. Next year, between 24th of July and August the 4th, we will witness the 32nd Olympic Games, which will be hosted in Tokyo, with 33 sports and around 10,000 athletes expected to compete in most prestigious and inclusive sporting competition on the planet. These 10,000 athletes are the most elite athletes within their sport, with only the very best of the best chosen to represent their countries. Once again, the concept of the competition and sports celebration have vastly evolved since its first inception in parallel with societal, scientific and technological advances. National federations were established mainly in the late 19th and early 20th centuries in Europe. The primary aim was to harmonize varying sets of rules, equipment and other logistics in order to allow teams from different villages, towns, cities and regions to compete against each other under the same parameters and conditions to create a so-called level playing field. In each sport, the establishment of the international federations followed soon after in response to a demand to compete nation versus nation and otherwise internationally. The main aim was to ensure that individual contests between teams are individuals from different nations, and more generally competitions with international participation could take place under a common set of rules and be officiated by judges, referees and umpires trained to apply these same rules consistently. Over the past 30 plus years, the proliferation of competitions sanctioned or organized by the Summer International Olympics alone has seen an exponential rise in their sanctioned events from 90 in 1970 to more than 8,400 over the course of Olympic quadrennial 2013 to 2016, according to SOF's database. SOF is Association of Summer Olympics International Federation. If you look at the hierarchy from the International Olympic Committee to the athletes and fans, the national governing bodies are sitting in the center of that, which should be our main focus. I will mostly refer to Future of Global Sports report of ASOF, which has a lot of parallels with NGBs in a smaller scale. The mission of the sports national governing bodies is to protect and defend the common interest of its members and develop the vision to position itself as a provider of added value to its members and for the international federations, sport and Olympic movement in general. In fast evolving world, sport is increasingly subjected to technological, socioeconomic and geopolitical developments that all sports governing bodies must anticipate and be prepared to respond to. A broad consensus exists that sports sector decisions are now influenced by a wide range of considerations, including social and technological changes, geopolitical issues and national and regional legislation. This is accentuated by governments increasingly moving to address cross-border challenges and the greater degree of involvement of business interest in the global sports sphere as its value grows. The three key actors in this sphere, governing bodies of sport, public authorities and business interests, will increasingly operate together in the same space and consequently, at times, compete against each other. The main challenge is to find a sustainable balance so that the interaction of these three groups optimizes outcomes, protecting the interest of society, sport and athletes, while allowing for the continued development and growth of a sector for which fans and society seem to have a limitless appetite. In a structured hierarchy of the sport, there are teams, clubs, regional associations, national associations, continental and international federations. Before we solve the global problem, we need to look at it from the country's point and the structure where there is a lack of trust or some kind of weakness. What are the duties of national governing bodies? Governance, as the name says, organizing, administration of competitions, development, integrity, medical, commercial delivery, technology, media and communications. Now, in order to establish all the duties correctly and efficiently, they need to be able to communicate. In order to communicate, they need the technology. When the communication is not established, whether it is through technology or other means, then the following problems occur. Lack of trust within the hierarchy, inefficient membership approval, minimal marketing, lack of funds, lack of CPD, limited data for decision making, limited data for monitoring health and safety, inadequate record keeping, manual data entry, missing information due to record keeping, and the list goes on. For example, if there is no historical medical footprint or historical medical data available for the athletes, it jeopardizes the national governing body's accountability, athletes' well-being, and overall the sport itself. Another example is that if there's no accurate record keeping in place, the athletes or teams can be mismatched, then that will give a bad impression for the sport. In most likely event that the athletes will be distancing themselves from the sport. When we talk about the technology, in particular blockchain, we do not suggest that the blockchain is a magical tool that will solve all the problems within the sports industry. However, there are approximately 60% of the process from recreational participations to IOC level that will improve the efficiency by blockchain without disrupting the current plans and executions. At MyNextMatch, we have developed certain tools to overcome national governing bodies' current problems and to help future projections, bearing in mind that the national governing bodies should comply with the rules and regulations from the governmental point, rules of the sport from the IOC and International Federation downwards, and also liaise with the commercial entities to monetize the operations. After all, the only difference between a commercial entity and non-commercial entity, such as national governing bodies, is the dividends is shared by the shareholders in commercial entities, and the profit is invested in members in non-profit entities. In this room, we gather to discuss the revolutionary advantages of blockchain. We are ahead of our time. We are visionary in our thoughts. It seems, however, that the rest of the sporting world is still playing catch-up when it comes to technology, almost as if they can only progress at a rate where they are still one generation behind the most effective solution. Even now, I bear witness to international federations who, despite having the option of cloud-based technology, prefer to elicit their work through copious amounts of paper. Just recently, I attended the international tournament where more than 1,000 pieces of paper were printed throughout the competition. From both a technological and ecological perspective, it is critical that we do more to educate sports organizations about this detrimental impact. I believe that blockchain will not be a full solution for mass sport, but what cannot be denied is that it will be a massive improvement on the current procedure. Before this, though, we must find out exactly why, despite a vast amount of current technologies being readily available for federations, the majority continue to ignore this in favor of environmentally unethical and inefficient methods. This lack of awareness is sure to affect the implementation of blockchain in the international sporting hierarchy, and we must find a way together on how to ensure that blockchain can overcome all barriers, both logistically and financially, so the technology can be readily available for all to design.
Thank you very much for that, and I think that sometimes sport does get left behind when we talk about technology, as people focus on the technology behind the sports kit and things like that, but less about those other things which really do affect international competitions, which are the testing and regulatory barriers that they have to go through.
Fundamentals are missing there.
Always important behind the significant sporting events themselves. Right, ladies and gentlemen, I will open this up now as always, and again, if you do have a question, if you could just say who you are and if you're from a company, where you represent, just so that everybody knows who everyone is. Who wants to start? Right, we are in the privileged position, ladies and gentlemen, of having the former Chief Scientific Officer, Professor Bernard Silverman, who himself has sat in front of me in select committees before, so quite often on that side of the table and not on that side, so very good insight.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be here. I think most recently was on research integrity, because I used to be involved in that. It's actually a comment, and I must declare an interest because I am an advisor to Public, a company which Maria's organisation is part of. But we haven't colluded, before I'm going to say what we said.
No collusion.
I have held senior positions in several universities, and I can't stress too much how right Maria is that academics who are brilliant at innovating in their own fields are often extremely resistant to innovation within the organisations they work in. And I think that GradBase is a really fascinating crucible for blockchain because it's rather specific. Lisa talked about changing the entire world, which is great, but the journey of 1,000 miles starts a single step and all that. And I think that the idea of credentialing and having a database of all that, which is a DLT kind of thing, is very important. And I think it's important to stress that it would not mean uniformizing credentials. It does not mean that every university has to give credentials of the same kind. It doesn't mean you have to give transcripts of the same kind. The great thing about it, because it's a DLT technology, is that every university can do its own thing within this overall regulated or semi-regulated thing. So I just want to commend Maria's work and her company's work because of this. And let's hope that universities are listening. I'm not sure whether it does take government to do anything. It could be something universities could do for themselves, but it might need just a little nudge or push from the likes of the committee that I was once in front of.
May I respond to that? So first of all, thank you very much. We really appreciate.
That's impromptu. It wasn't prompted.
It was the problem. Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to say that not only we really believe in what we are doing, but also we are very proud to have a UK innovator in this space. There are not many, and so we are one of them. And we certainly would like to repeat, we thought very carefully about GDPR compliance when there is a European forum that is still grappling with that, and so that's really, really important to us. Because ultimately, once we deploy the technology needs to serve the business and never the other way around. That's the first thing to say. The second thing I would like really to thank you for what you said, and also to point out exactly the real key point. I mean, for universities to work together does not mean uniformizing, but it means that they are simply operating potentially as a consortium, although that is also not quite necessary. I mean, the way we operate, I'll come in a moment how we operate, but it typically offers the opportunity, if people cooperate in a sector, typically optimize the processes and they have opportunity to share best practice. That does not mean doing exactly the same thing. And in fact, we have worked with different universities and different corporations, and we certify different kinds of skills. So we are very flexible in the way in which we operate. And very often we are able to certify skills that are very difficult to certify in the standard way because we are much more agile and because of the scalability. And this is really brings us to the profession of the future. It's very unlikely that in 10, 20 years' time people will still go to universities. If we look at how the digital landscape in education is changing and the amount of content that is out there for free and the amount of educational institutions that are digital, it's very likely that we will all continue learning, and so we all will need to continue to have qualification that we continue to share, and that's really the movement where we are going. And the question is and remains, how trustworthy are those qualifications? Because in 1997, I could have pretended to be a dog in the internet. Of course, today I can't anymore because Facebook knows that I'm not a dog. That's a different story. But if we come down to qualifications, who actually certifies that the qualification really says what it says on the tin? And that's really, really important. We do have a solution for that, but it's something we really need to think about in the future.
Okay. And would anybody else like to make a quick comment?
Yeah, I think, look, a few things that were actually said there. One, in terms of, no, I actually don't want to change. Well, actually, I do want to change the world. I want to change the world of education, but it's already changing. So some of the things that I'm talking about, they actually exist. As I said, there's a whole learning economy out there that is actually doing things where they are putting entire amounts of learning on learning ledgers and creating value and so forth around it. But I think I would like to add to the comment in terms of the current education system that we have, and also it refers to the sporting one. We're looking at an education system that is probably at least 1 or 2 generations behind the current technology we have now. So the challenges that we've got are not just about the blockchain technology and its massive potential, which we must harness. We've got an education system that's 2 or 3 generations behind where we're sitting in this room now. So for us to harness its potential at the rate of speed of change that it's occurring, we've got to do something dramatically different. So in things like, for example, credentialing, it is vital that we do have credentialing on a blockchain ledger. One of the challenges we have, though, is that we've got hundreds of thousands of institutions and organisational bodies around the world that can't agree on one level of vernacular to put those blockchain credentials there. Now, the flow-on effect to the workforce and people employing those individuals is massive. We're not saying they have to deliver the same qualifications, but at least get some consistency. So some of the challenges that we have with blockchain technology are actually nothing to do whatsoever with the technology. The technology is working wonderful and it does amazing things. It's about our rate of acceptance and advancement of it. It's about governments not stepping in and advocating to institutions that are actually taking, in many cases, government money, that they need to be accountable and more open and transparent and actually move with the times. And I guess the last thing is, yes, I agree as well in terms of the sandbox that needs to be created. It's not just a nice nice thing. This is a critical point that we've gotten to where, and it mustn't just be universities, it must be the entire education system and learning as we know it, in place. So I think there's some really good conversations about that.
There are lots of similarities, there are lots of parallels with the sports and education, because we have a bunch of people sitting behind the desk and just bouncing
it's not my world that you
and at the end nothing comes through. We're talking about the athletes' health and safety here. For example, if there is an athlete who is concussed, let's say last week, and he can easily go behind the scenes and compete in another sport, nobody will know that this guy is concussed a few days ago, and the doctor sitting there at the desk who examines these athletes are also kind of, who knows that these guys are qualified doctors? Are they paramedics or are they kind of really qualified doctors? So these are the kind of things that we need to come across, but it also comes, as I said, as you said, that these decision makers are the ones that who's going to say yes or no. So yeah, I mean, we are sitting on the same side of the
Important parallel here, but gentleman at the front.
Hello, my name is Petko Karmachev, Industrial, one of the permanent advisory board members. Just a very quick question. I just checked that we are running out of time. I have many questions. I mean, really, to Maria about tokenizing the value of learning. You literally touched base on this, but I think there's a lot of value in between, especially when we're talking the bridge of academia and education and business. We won't educate, I mean, I'm purely 100% business. We want 100% educated people. We don't want any just fake diplomas. So how tokenizing the value of education could bring value to business? And the second question is to Oner about legally binding smart contracts. A couple of weeks ago with Mark Rollins here, we were at a seminar of the Accord project about implementing, and it's really important here at the Parliament to speak about implementing legally binding smart contracts. So do you see any time soon an implementation of the legally binding smart contracts into sports, because now it's happening on the esports side quite rapidly, also in probably in education. Sorry about so many questions.
Yeah, the question on tokenising the value of learning is an interesting one. We're about to deliver a project with the African Union, and again, it's another UK innovation which is extraordinary. So it's a cross international border example. We're about to partner with the UN on this one. So we've got 1 million learners in 13 nations in the African Union, and the value of their learning is going to be articulated in the AI that's created that sits in underneath the platform. So it's a social and collaborative learning platform. We're using immersive learning and a whole range of other tools and skill sets. We've partnered with another company in the US who has already built the platform, and they've done a lot of research out of Stanford University. And the artificial intelligence data that we've got in behind will actually become what we call learn fuel, and that will be the value data that we will be using to develop the tokenised value of learning. So the individuals in that system will literally, I kid you not, seen in an app that sits on their computer and when they're actually in their learning environment, the value of what they're doing is going to be equated in dollars that they can in fact reinvest in learning and other skills. So from the employer's perspective, instead of actually paying an educational institution for a course or a program, they will be paying for an outcome and the individual can reinvest that as well. So this is a deliverable project that will be delivered in the next 12 months. We're 11 months, we're 1 month in now, we've got 11 months to go. So in 12 months, 1 million learners. It's extraordinary. Now, if you think about that in the terms of the UK system, the burden that education currently is on the government system, because much of it is funded or underfunded or decreasing in funding, we must find alternative ways to educate people moving forward. So we really do have to look at alternative methods of funding that. And certainly employers are advocating change, but there's not a support on the other side. So there is technology there again, And there is projects there again, but we desperately need a sandbox environment for the government to activate some of these projects. And it's the perfect opportunity for the UK to stamp their foot of excellence and start to export some of these programs internationally, particularly at the time they're politically sitting at the moment. So it's a fantastic opportunity.
Any other comments on that?
I don't think there was anything for me, but what I would like to say, I would like to say something about smart contract. I think that the challenge for legally binding smart contract is not very much especially under the UK law. It's not very much a sort of seeing where are the parts of the contract which are an offering and acceptance consideration and an intention to create a binding relationship, but rather in an overall and operating framework. I mean, before doing this job, I worked in the nuclear industry in the railway, and my job was essentially looking at software to ensure the safety of the software. So, because the reality is that software contains bugs, and a smart contract are no different. So that's the reality. I mean, it suffices to look at the DAO, and that says it all. And so really the question then becomes, if my contract doesn't say what we agreed, is that clear that what we agreed, and is it agreed what went wrong and where it went wrong? Because that requires a certain amount of specialized skills. One of the things that we do is, for example, audit smart contract and to ensure that they behave as they do. So really, it's not sufficient to see the smart contract as a legally binding activity, but also having a legislation around it that guarantees that things go well when actually the smart contract goes wrong. So will the judge understand what the smart contract is doing? Will the barrister then goes and argue the case for the party that operates? And I know there is a lot talking about arbitration, and that's absolutely fantastic. But then the question is, why do we go back to an old system of arbitration when we really want to move forward with innovation? So I think that there is an opportunity to create a legally binding smart contract. We need really to be clear about why and what is going to happen when something goes wrong, and who is going to sort out the mess, in my view. So that's really a good point.
Can I say one very brief thing on that? There's actually a company, this is extraordinary area of work that I'm working in as well, is smart contracts, because a smart contract is really just an automated version of a physical one. So it is only as good as the content that we put into it. So for example, when we get to a pain point in a smart contract, humans are going to have the same reaction to the pain point as we have now. It's just that it's autonomously going to occur. So there's a company in the UK, for example, called Code Red, who is digitising all the financial regulatory code, and that code is being auditable and agreed upon, and it can then be used as a white label to go into smart contracts. I'm also working with them and another colleague from the States to do the same thing for work health and safety procedural requirements and safety requirements, because much of that is common across all spectrums of every industry that we work in. That is a specialised set of skills. So developing digitised code to go into smart contracts that we all agree is the authentic product and it's been audited is an extraordinary step moving forward. And the last part of that, of course, is that we also need to be able to have a conversation about what does happen when we get to these pain points. So this is the conversation that we're engaged in at the moment, is how do we digitise smart contracts and code around the known times we will disagree, because otherwise we're just going to be creating a more complex system than we've got now.
Well, it takes two to tango in terms of getting everybody involved in under one roof. You have to liaise with different parties. So I always saw the sport organizations as smaller scale governments. So they've got all these management boards, and then they've got administrative department, they've got medical department, medical committee, got events coordinator, so on. So once everybody's under the picture, and when you liaise with the top of the pyramid, you can actually trickle down and making sure everybody obeys the rules and regulations of the decision makers at the top. So, for example, if the doctors have been approved by the medical committee, this is it. You just kind of switched it on. So from there on, everything else just kind of takes on. If the events coordinator or the administrative team says he's our legally kind of affiliated member, then this is it. This is just from there on. You can actually accrediting everything through the smart contracts. So you're creating that small umbrella within this.
We are going to have to move into the second part of the evidence session tonight. So if there are any other issues you want to bring up with any of our speakers, obviously afterwards a great opportunity to network. But for the second part, we are going to go into charities and NGOs, something which actually is quite important because it's a real area where blockchain can fix. One of those specific things is obviously when you give something away, do you know it is going to where you wanted it to go to, particularly, and with greater transparency we can hopefully see where we're going for there. Now, two speakers tonight are Jens Albers, who's the co-founder and CEO advisor to Decentrl Blockchain for Good, and to Marco Robinson, who's the founder of FreedomX. So I'll let Jens just say who he is for a minute, and then we'll go to Marco, and then we'll go back to go into your evidence.
Fantastic. Thank you for the invitation first. I'm here to replace actually Cecile Baird, who many of you might know, but she actually also had an accident and couldn't come. So I was told yesterday, could you please take over? And but that's not a problem at all. I'm really happy to be here. Blockchain for Good is a think tank that works with governments like the UK, works with governments in Germany and the European Union, but also on state level in the United States. We create roundtables, we create working groups together with government where we bring together academics, the government and startups, interested startups in the space. We also mentor at universities, Georgetown University and UCLA and UC San Diego, which is why we should also talk later on. There are some very interesting opportunities, I think. I'm not only the director of Blockchain for Good, I'm also the CEO of Decentrl. Decentrl is a consultancy in the space. We started to be a consultancy for blockchain startups in 2013 with a former experience from my co-founder in the whole .com innovation period. I myself come from the charity background actually. I worked for the Robert F. Kennedy Foundation for Human Rights before I dived fully into blockchain in 2012, 2013.
Marco.
Hey, good evening everyone. But I got to me in the end. Right. So I'm the founder of FreedomX. FreedomX is the first social impact program on blockchain where our objective is to get the right help to the right people in the right time, transparently. Now, I used to be homeless. In fact, I was homeless at 2 years old with my mum. I was on and off homeless for 8 years. So I've slept with my mum as a child, obviously not aware that I was too young, but I've also slept as an adult in lots of different places. In fact, a lot of homeless people don't really sleep on the street. Most homeless people hide. So I was one of the ones that was hiding. And also, some of you may know me from the Channel 4 TV show that I did 18 months ago called Get a House for Free. Channel 4 asked me to give a house away to address the social housing issue in the UK. Asked if I would like to do that because they heard of my story. I'll tell you more about my story after our friend next to me has spoken. But that really changed my view of that charity as it's in its present form is completely the most abused industry in the world. So I'll pass it over to you,
Good. Yes, I want to dive exactly into that topic a bit at the beginning. I've been before in the very early stages of the refugee crisis around Syria. I've been to northern Syria, southern Turkey. I've been to the camps Karatepe, Camp Moria, on the island of Lesbos. And that was actually the place where I met Bitcoin really, to be honest. I heard of it before, but I met refugees actually in late 2012 who utilized Bitcoin for remittance to send money back home. Very easy use case. When we started Decentrl as a consultancy, since the beginning we were doing really heavy due diligence, and because there are so many promises in this space and so many amazing things that could be done with this technology, and I totally agree, it could be absolutely fantastic. But when you follow an innovation, the simple solutions, the easy solutions that also government might be included in, are very often the best to build a foundation, to then build the more complicated layers on top of it. Charities do have a lack of trust in the public opinion, a decreasing rate still. It never stops. You can see regularly news in the press that talk about a charity having very high overhead costs, misusing funds, and so on and so on. So when you look at blockchain technology, the first thing that might come to your mind is transparency. Transparency in blockchain technology is a very amazing feature, actually. But at the same time, in every round that we discuss that topic with charities themselves, the problem with that is if you put all costs and spendings of a charity on a public ledger, which is totally transparent for everyone to see, that creates a huge amount of data that is very difficult to explain. And it needs explanation. You can't just put the data out there and let it float, because people will read this data wrong. And overhead costs are a topic with charities, but if you just make everything public, we think that it could very well end in a PR marketing disaster, even if you're a charity that really does good things. And apart from that, when we have a look at the technology itself, and it was mentioned already by Lisa before, every data entry on a ledger is as true and honest as the party that did the entry. So it's not that the blockchain gives the fairy tale dust of honesty and everything on it. The person who is the trusted entity, hopefully, that does the entry on the blockchain, where the data becomes part of the blockchain, that is the weak point, actually. And if that entry isn't done in the right way, then we have the same problem as without blockchain technology. And blockchain technology can't change anything about that at all if you do that wrong. So on top of that, there's another thing when it comes to charities. Charity is full of complicated processes, which not only are based on facts, but also on morals and ethics. How to create a morals and ethics entry on a blockchain database. I think that's nearly impossible. So it could be the case that every human being would agree to one charity spending 10,000 more on a different thing because they were maybe it was a well in a town which had way more kids than another town which only has like people at our age or whatever. There are morals and ethics sometimes that you have to apply on decisions in the charity space that can't be a naked number on a blockchain entry. So it's a very difficult topic when it comes to charities. Blockchain is still an incredibly young technology, and charities are a very complicated environment. If you want to really use blockchain technology for charities, you can start with very simple solutions, which might involve government, pilot projects from government, for example, a fully automated solution that uses smart contracts, as mentioned before, where we talk about gift aid. Gift aid is an amazing program in government. So when you, as a donor, give money to a charity, you can basically fill out a form and tell the charity there's another 25% extra, which the charity can claim, which is tax related. I don't want to go into too much detail here right now. But this could be fully automated on the blockchain, meaning there could be a government-controlled project, maybe, where we create a basic blockchain where the entry happens by 2 confirming parties per entry. The charity receives the money from the donor, confirms it. The donor says, also a confirming entry, I've given the money to this charity, and I also claim the gift aid for this. So the charity can claim the gift aid. The government can just read out the data because it's a simple exchange of information on a trusted ledger with 2 confirming parties, where no one would have a benefit from doing the wrong entry. So the benefits of these things would, in this case, for example, would be for the donor because he would save time because he can do a very automated entry on a blockchain instead of filling out a form, sending it back to the charity. The charity, of course, has way less administration costs, overhead costs. The government, same, way less administration costs, overhead costs. It can just read out a simple entry out of a blockchain and forward this 25% advantage for the charity. Super easy use case. Very simple solution could be, if applied, if encouraged by the government, could be a very, very interesting, good starting point when it comes to charities. I don't know if charities are here present. Charities have, yeah, of course, yes. But let's say
I am a registered charity, sir.
Let's say the classic traditional Red Cross and others in this area. So what you said about universities before, very interesting point, that there are sometimes
like that too. Yes.
yeah, it's the same with charities basically. I've been in a huge charity conference, and it was a charity technology conference, not a charity conference for some other reasons. It was on technology, and they did a poll on this conference, and at the end of these 3 days, they presented the result of the poll. And the question of this poll was, literally, I'm not even kidding, do charities need technology to innovate? So basically, the way, I don't know how to innovate without technology, there are lots of ways, absolutely, but technology is basically the easiest path for innovation, because digital transformation, I mean, we don't even have to talk about blockchain technology, which is like level 10, but even level 1 or 2 involve technology. Well, the poll result with charities was 82% of charity people said we don't need technology to innovate, which was shocking for me. It was 3 years ago. I think blockchain technology, with simple solutions like the one mentioned before, where they would have more money, less overhead, less administration, less efforts in many ways, I think they would really like these solutions, but none of these charities really want to start producing these solutions. And that is something where I think government would be a perfect party to come in. We are on the stage of experiencing a very disruptive innovation. And the definition of Clayton Christensen, and I wrote my master thesis about this, the innovator's dilemma, this means the value to this innovation most likely follows an S-curve, which means the first ones out there won't have a massive impact, the first projects out there. But once a foundation is provided and once you have adoption, then the value of the innovation will increase exponentially. Each iteration from there is drastically better than the last round. So the development in blockchain technology, as you also mentioned before already, when it comes to the technical levels, there are super incredible, amazing technological solutions out there. But when we talk about the public, when we talk about charities, when we talk about human beings and human data is the most sensitive data in the world, we as Blockchain for Good always say, use the simple solutions, make very simple, easy steps with this technology, and as soon as we have a few big ones working with that technology, then we will make very, very big steps automatically. And please don't let Facebook be the one doing that, because that is a very, very, very bad solution that has been presented there last week. Sorry for this. Blockchain technology, we are very often very critical, although we're called Blockchain for Good, but we're very careful in our how we evaluate projects. Blockchain technology is here to stay. And although I'm a very skeptical and careful person when I have a look at startups, for example, in the industry, I still have to say that I'm fully convinced this technology and its implications, positive and also negative, are as big as the disruption called the internet. It's the same size. It's the same size of innovation. And without government involvement, though, and I'm aware that in the very libertarian world of blockchain technology, decentralize everything and so on, this is a quite unpopular opinion. But without government involvement, this technology can be incredibly dangerous too. And I would really welcome government involvement on pilot projects a lot, because that would provide us with a basic, safe layer where we can then add the really crazy and interesting stuff. The last question that was provided to me in the build-up to this event was, can blockchain and the Internet of Value support a more equitable distribution of wealth? Well, it's 8 minutes, and I think I'm nearly at the end. And that is a very big question. The potential for this is huge. Unfortunately, there are also several buts. So at the moment, we don't have an easy onboarding process for blockchain technology, and I think this is the biggest hurdle we have in general. Onboarding with blockchain technology is complicated. You have to create simple solutions that have a great UX, where every single citizen in the whole world is able to use a blockchain. And that is the biggest challenge we have, because blockchain in itself with private keys and so on is a very complicated technology. Unfortunately, it's now Facebook leading the way, sorry to mention that again. But if it would be government leading the way, that would be very, 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 very helpful. And if you get to the point where it becomes easy for people to onboard with blockchain, or distributed ledger or distributed ledger technology. It opens a huge world. Being your own merchant in an easy way, cut out lots of middlemen and eBay, PayPal, and so on. It can liberate people in a massive way. And can blockchain play a major role in distribution of wealth? Absolutely. The potential is there. But for now, I think we should tackle the little problems, the simple solutions, create safe, small, and safe environments to use this technology, and then build from there.
Thank you for that. You wouldn't have thought we were a last-minute stand-in.
Definitely not. Well,
very good.
Yes,
very good. So now on to Marco.
Sorry, I don't have a script.
It's all right. We can't wait for the second version of what you give us the tempting.
Okay, so I like to simplify things and say, first of all, who in this room knows how blockchain works? That was a very half-hearted hand up. Could you explain it?
Sure. How much time are you going to give us to explain?
Exactly, right. How many people in the government understand blockchain? Damien?
Very few. This is why exactly why
It's a very political answer.
All-party parliamentary group up. That's exactly why.
Okay, so let's go back to where we started. Bitcoin is the first use case of blockchain, pretty much, right? Bitcoin was and is still widely used, mostly in third world countries that do not have access to bank accounts, that do not have access to a way of remitting money or receiving money to actually eat, live, and exist. 10 million children starve every single year because they do not have access to clean water, food, or housing. 3 billion people are socially excluded, which is a very cold term considering those people are human beings, which means they don't have a house, they don't have an address, so therefore they can't get a bank account. And you can't have a bank account without an address. So the system is geared to help the people that are socially included. Now, the other point I'm going to make today is that we, as a human race, have lost our sense of community. You have to go on Facebook to find out who your neighbour is. When I was a kid, the back door was open, the front door was open, and you played out till 11 o'clock at night. Right? That's gone. So how do we find a way that blockchain can actually be a kind of way of connecting people, like Facebook was supposed to be? So let's just talk about the disconnected society. Has anyone ever walked down a road and seen someone holding a cardboard sign saying, I'm homeless? Has anyone ever seen that? What is your thoughts when you see that?
Unacceptable.
Okay, that's a very moral answer.
Yes, it is.
Right? Does anyone have any doubts that if they give that person money, they might spend it on the wrong things? Right. So this is a disconnect. Now, that person is generally outside a supermarket or a coffee shop. So in society, the coffee shop allows that person to be outside of the cardboard sign, yet they won't bring that person into their economy and help them. Right? Because ignorance is bliss and there's no reward. So blockchain is, I agree with you about blockchain, it's not the solution to charity. You have to change the model of charity.
I didn't say that.
I know. You said it wasn't a solution, totally. Paraphrasing. Right? So I think I've come up with a great solution. I've written a white paper about it, I've introduced it, already helped 100 people that were homeless into homes. So I can build houses on a 3D printing machine for £3,000 in one day. Did anyone know that technology existed? Anyone not know? Right, so we have example solar powered tents that cost a couple of £100. Now, going back to the way that charity works at the moment, you've probably heard of the scandal of Oxfam, where donations are used to use prostitutes. You've probably heard of UNICEF's CEO that was sexually abusing the staff, etc. You know, these are all blockchain-related cases that could be completely transformed if you had blockchain for those individuals. So you've got a situation where right now charity is very tainted, and it comes back to visually, when you send money to charity, where is it going? How do you know it's getting to the right people? Are you helping them? Is there a meaningful connection between you and the person you're helping? Because let's face it, guys, if you can actually help somebody and you know you're helping them and they thank you for it, how do you feel? It's probably the best feeling ever in the world that you can have, right? I know this because I, again, used to be homeless, and my life transformed because I was able to give a house I didn't have on a TV show to 3 families, and there was 25,000 applicants for that house, by the way. And one of the families was from Syria, and they paid £20,000 to a human trafficker to get out of Syria 13 years ago. The father and 2 sons had to leave the mum behind because they couldn't afford to bring the mum with them. Unfortunately, the town was destroyed, they lost the mum. Now those people, that family was living on £30 a week for about 8 years. They were given a house eventually, then it was taken from them, and when I met them, they were living under a bridge and in a church shelter. So I was able to bring them into a house, and I was able to fight an asylum claim, and thank God they got asylum 2 weeks ago granted. But it took 13 years and lots of work. So what I'm suggesting here, what I'm proposing for you to look at is, if you could see the person you're giving the money to was worthy of your donation, right? So how do you verify that? How do you qualify that? Well, you have a filtering and a testing system where you bring people in and they will willingly give their information, and you can verify as much as you can. But obviously, I will tell you right now that a lot of people don't have IDs. They don't have IDs, they don't have passports, they don't have driving licenses because they're not in the included where you can get that, right? So I've developed a system with an app. It's a technology where I'm creating kind of an Amazon for the socially excluded. So I'm saying to businesses, the public will rate you based on how you help the local community in terms of the underprivileged. For example, if that coffee shop was able to take that person off the street, give them some accommodation, rehabilitate them, train them and mentor them to be a barrister, would that be something worthwhile in your community? That's just one example, right? Or you could microfinance someone to run a coffee shop and a bicycle for £500. You can get them off the street pretty quickly, because it's not just about the home, it's about the economy around that home. You've got to educate. This is where education comes in. And why education is the most important, I would say, key to the transformation of where people are in their life. Now, I'm a school dropout. I didn't go to university. I was the guy at the back of the room looking out the window when I did go to school and played truant mostly, because at home it was a nightmare. I went to 50 different schools before I was 12 years old. I got bullied at every one of them because I was always the new guy, and right then I had orange hair. We don't like ginger in the UK, so there you go, right? So I've learned the hard way, and from my perspective, it's all about getting that help to the right people now. And that's where blockchain, in my opinion, is a fantastic use case, because with blockchain it's transparent and people can see. They can talk to the person they're giving a blanket to now online, right? Because we have a way of giving those homeless people phones that they have coupons they can redeem in restaurants and supermarkets. For example, did you know that 40% of restaurants and supermarkets, 40% of the food is thrown away every day? Thrown away. Completely thrown away. Did you also know that Guess clothes, have you heard of Guess clothes? Right? They had a summer range. Instead of giving it to the homeless, they shredded the clothes and threw it away. Right? Now that is not, well, that's actually an indicative sign of the society we live in today. Because there's no reward, there is no, fulfillment, there's nothing for people, there's nothing in it for people to actually give. It's all about guilt, or seeing an advert on a TV show with a well-known actor, send £3 to Africa for a pair of gloves, and only 10p actually gets there. And then we talk about foreign aid. For example, an extreme case is where the South African president in 2015 was sent 19.5 million in foreign aid and spent £17 million on his personal residence. This is the abuse of charity you've got right now. This is where blockchain can change that. Yes, it depends on the person inputting it, but that can be solved. Because there has to be a reward system and there has to be a protocol for people to do that. If you are homeless and you've got children on the street, what would you think about this committee right now deciding whether we should use blockchain or not for charity? If it was your children and you were starving to death, right? And I hasten to add, there are 14 million people living in poverty in this country currently. 14 million people. Yet, there are enough houses to put those people in because local authorities have tens of thousands of houses, if not hundreds of thousands of houses, that they could be, renovated and actually used for accommodation. So, I'm saying that blockchain is a fantastic use case for charity. It could revolutionise the way that people have a trust to actually pay money over. Most of my friends I talk to say to me, you know what, Marco, I don't even give to charity anymore because I don't even know where it's going. So the way I'm doing this is to actually, yes, when companies give to CSR, corporate social responsibility, they get a tax write-off. So what if the company could actually give something to help the local community? There was a protocol that if they did, like TripAdvisor, the public would rate them, and that company would go up in people's eyes and improve their profit in society, give create more jobs, and ultimately get the socially excluded problem, which is ridiculous, into the socially included, where people can actually live and thrive. So that's all I've got to say about that. Thank you very much. Any questions?
Ladies and gentlemen, any questions? There, the gentleman at the back.
Sorry, is that me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well,
I'll just introduce myself. My name's stand up. Pressure than I am. I'm the founder of a non-profit called Dust Day, and we effectively sweep up digital currencies, do exactly what you've said, and give it to projects all over the world, cutting out all the infrastructure of most charities. Using partly blockchain, but blockchain's not the only solution, it's part of the tech build. My question is, we come across, and you mentioned a big project in Africa around education. There's lots of different bodies. There's Blockchain for Impact, Blockchain for Good. And there was a big UN Blockchain for Impact summit in New York recently. And then the week after, there was an industry body called Blockchain for Impact that had a 2-day event. So my question is, how can it be better coordinated? And do you see that just being a government type initiative, or how can we better coordinate that?
I think it's a great thing that there are several doing this. They do it to a different degree and with with different focus points. We do it since 2013 roughly, which is blockchain the Stone Age. Well, it's not the Stone Age, but let's say the Middle Age. And the thing is, as long as it contributes to what's happening, it's important. And I don't think it should rely only on the government. What we do is we do government, academics, and then bringing in the startups that present the technology, for example, or like here, the APPG group, a very, very interesting initiative. I love it. And because companies and academics and government together can tackle something so much better than if you just look at the startup perspective. When it comes to charities, I think the big charities, they have all the experience and all the knowledge that no one of the startup people has. So if you do a startup in this industry and just think, I'll do charity now because I have a great technology solution, then it can't work because of the lack of experience in what really charity means and what is behind just giving something. It's great that this exists.
You're saying the management don't work?
No, I'm not saying this. I'm not saying this. I love your enthusiasm, absolutely. But I think it's a very, very complicated topic. And also charity is about, but to stay with your question, actually, I don't think there should be an authority on blockchain for good or blockchain for bad or blockchain for impact or blockchain for social impact. I don't think there should be an authority. Every single driver is more than welcome, absolutely. Every single startup is more than welcome, absolutely.
I was just add something to that. I was actually at the Blockchain for Impact Summit in the UN, which is actually run by the Blockchain Commission, which is part of the UN, so it's a very different forum. There was 300 world leaders, and I led a session at that day. What was extraordinary that came out of that was the Under Secretary General, and this I think fits perfectly to what you're saying. What he stated was, apart from the fact that SDG 5, which is around gender equality, is the most critical SDG in terms of it impacts absolutely everything, single thing that we do. In fact, it will add $338 trillion to the economy if we meet it. The other one that he said was critical was SDG 17, which is about partnerships. So the UN, in particular in this blockchain space, are advocating the fact that government and private industry must come together to solve solutions. It will not happen on its own. It's not a race to who gets there first. It's not a race to get who's the best. It is not even a race. It's working collaboratively together to solve the world's greatest issues. In terms of the charity model, one of the key issues that we do have, and you did touch on it, but it is critical to all. I've been doing some work with World Vision, who actually have a whole division now that are looking at blockchain. But to be honest, they actually say we don't actually know why we need it, is their question. The first
Can I just say something? Why do you think they're saying that?
it's a lack of, there is a lack of understanding about the
Are you
potential.
sure that's the only reason?
In regards to the people I was engaging with, yes. But when I said to them, what are your goals? What are your actions? What are the things that you're seeking? It actually comes back to everything that we've said today. Some of the key small things that blockchain can address right now is an identity for everyone. Without an identity, you cannot be banked. Without a bank account or without an identity, you cannot be educated. And educated is the key to financial inclusion. So there is a single tool that if we had a sovereign identity for every single person, and we have an opportunity to start that as a generation now, where we can, as people are registered in the included areas, or if they're not, get an identity. That is a key thing that we should be advocating at every government level.
Every touch point.
So do you want to comment on that, Marco? Because I've got another couple of questions.
I have to comment because I have worked in charities, and what better people to run charities than people that have been vulnerable and victimised in life? Because from my point of view, the best people that to help other people are the people that have actually walked in their shoes. That's what I'm going to say right now. And I'm asking all of the people in this room, has any one of you been homeless?
Yeah.
Yes? Congratulations, welcome to my club. Right, how did you feel when you were homeless?
Horrible. I was 14.
And what help did you have?
Relatives.
Right, so if those relatives weren't there, what would have happened to you?
It was for the mums who were on their house.
So we have a situation where, you've got a situation where you say you talk to World Vision. I've also talked to World Vision and worked with them. And I've been to South America and built many houses for homeless families for less than $2,000. Now, I had a tremendous difficult time getting cooperation from the charities, because as soon as I talked about transparency, they became extremely defensive because they are defending their income from that charity. So my research is extensive, has discovered that the reason charities don't like blockchain is because it uncovers the truth. And I'm sorry to say this, but this is my research that I've done. Now, it doesn't mean that everyone in charity is bad. It means that there are certain people in those organisations that are at the top. The top of those organisations, receiving the most money, have the most to lose. And that's my experience so far, that they have to put in on the plate. It's not just about, we didn't know about it.
I think it comes down to too, and this is one of the points that I
If
actually...
you can be very brief,
very
because I
brief.
only have a few minutes to
One
get
thing
two
that's
questions
very
in.
brief is that we actually need to think about education about blockchain, because a lot of the things that are driving these conversations are fear of the unknown and the lack of mastery in the skill set. So I think there's a big picture conversation that sits underneath it as well.
Christian.
Well, I'm Christian de Bartavon, excuse me. I'm the Global Ambassador of Public and the CEO of Projectus Consultants Limited, which is a company for future technologies. You've actually jumped the gun of the very question I was about to ask you at the end of the first session, and in fact you've connected with Marco for the exact very same question I was going to ask. Sovereign identity as a solution to what you're doing on Amazon, because indeed, who are we? We're not just education, we're not only degrees, we're not only what we did, we're ourselves without anything, as a matter of fact. We should be able to prove who we are without any other paperwork, as a matter of fact. So some people think about the iris, others think about the DNA. It goes way beyond this. It's an ethical, philosophical question. What is a human being, and how do you define it, and how do you identify this person? So what you said about, my question to you was, could you tell us more about sovereign identity? So this question is obsolete already. And I was going to say, how can, the problem about the homeless person proving who that person is, well, you've answered it. So it's more common.
I'll give an example. Actually,
Yeah.
one of my close colleagues was involved with Banda Aceh after the disaster in Banda Aceh. When she arrived on the ground, she was actually there advocating for the company who had given foreign aid from the Australian government. It was quite daunting because for the first time it actually put into perspective what she now knows about blockchain. That's one of her advocacies in moving forward. She found people that had no identity. They didn't even know. People said they must have an identity. They lived in a non-inclusive environment where there was an identity. They actually had no land because the records that registered their land had been destroyed. So they had people with no idea who they were. They couldn't even identify people who were dead because they had no identity. They didn't belong to anyone or anything. They had no land because they couldn't identify where the land was. They couldn't even identify where the buildings were. Imagine being faced with that. That's where blockchain has a massive potential that cannot be ignored at a world level to create a sovereign identity that we own.
So, Jens and Marco, you've got literally about 30 seconds to try and answer that. I've got another question, so I'm trying to get everybody in.
Absolutely. Your question is the most central question for blockchain technology in general, at all. Because every single solution where blockchain can be a major disruptive force of change is based on the identity of the person participating in the network. So when we look at things like universal basic income, how could that be distributed via blockchain technology? It only works if you have every single identity on the blockchain. If you're looking at the KYC data, if you look at the financial industry and so on, all the really, really big things that blockchain will change, not can change, will change, are based around KYC. But at this point, again, being a bit the careful person, before we put all people's personal data on a blockchain, which is an immutable ledger, we have to be very sure that it's a safe solution. And this is again where government comes in, because I would rather see government applying this solution, starting this solution, than, again, I'm sorry, Facebook.
And it needs GDPR compliance.
Yeah, GDPR compliance and so on. We need to have this on a very, very solid level. It's super important.
What didn't Mark Zuckerberg say that privacy is the future now?
Yeah, his quote.
Just a quick comment on that, Marco.
Sorry?
Do you have a quick comment on what's just been said?
Yeah, I totally agree with that. People need to. The ID is real. It's not about. I take the edge of sovereign ID and I would put it on accessible resources that ID can get you as an individual. Because right now, if you're excluded, you have literally very little access. Look at Venezuela as an example. Extreme example. Total dictator. The currency is just ridiculous inflation. Those people only can survive with Bitcoin, for example. Right, so it's about accessibility to resources. If that ID can provide that, then of course you've got to do it.
So very conscious of time, I'm trying to get one, maybe two people in. So the lady back, less than 30 seconds to ask it, definitely less than 30 seconds to answer it.
Very quickly if I can. So I'm Maxine Room, I've worked in education, I've been a principal of colleges across the UK, latterly working for a charity, NACRO, but also a serial entrepreneur, setting up data science consultancy, but also an equality, diversity and inclusion social media platform at the moment. So thank you to the panel, because you've given me a lot to think about. But my journey on blockchain has been very, very new. And when I talk to my colleagues in the education world, they know very little about it. I've got the opportunity to write an article for next week's City AM on equality, diversity, inclusion and blockchain. And my question to the panel is, what should I write? What's the one thing you want me to tell the world? And what should I do as an influencer across this space? Because I know in education, I've just come out doing an interim principal's job, that funding drives behaviour. There is very little funding to invest in some of the technology that we think we need, even the basics. And how is the government going to support that in the future? I'm really at a loss.
So, if all the panel want to do it, they've got about 15 seconds each, but if all the panel want to do it, they've maybe got 20 seconds each.
They can tell me afterwards if they want to.
Yes.
I think having been a woman in a technology world and having been a minority since I've been working on this, I would like you to write a call for action for women and minorities. Essentially says that technology is power, and if you don't want to left behind, you need to jump on now.
Great.
I've got a bit of that race, so thanks.
If we know venture capital for women-led business sits at 2.2% globally, it sits at 0.5% in the UK, yet we know that there is a return on investment of 78 cents in the dollar for a women-led business as opposed to 31 cents in the man. My question would be, who is holding VCs and investment companies accountable for their poor investment decisions, because that will change equality and diversity.
Well, you can combine it all, education, sports and charities, under the refugees, that they need some educations and activities to improve themselves and their families and wherever they live in their poverty. So it can be something.
First, buy Bitcoin. Second, second, blockchain is as big as the internet. That's really basically, if it has to be that short.
I would ask a question. What if the person on the street could be the key to a happy life?
The gentleman behind does want to say something, so yes, you can say it, but they've got to be able to answer it in 10 seconds.
It was regarding identity. I should say, my name is Martin Walker. I'm CEO of Active Leisure. We've built a blockchain platform. I believe that you don't need to have from the government. I actually believe that if you develop a system that helps financial inclusion, you'll create a system that will build a history, no matter who these people are. And it's that financial history that you can share, albeit just numerically. And that would give you an identity. So I'd say start with financial inclusion. I think minorities as well.
Yeah, and I would say entrepreneurs create jobs, governments tax that income.
I was going to say, I'll give one practical example though where I think government does come in. So in Zimbabwe, and if anybody's following Zimbabwe, they have just outlawed all foreign currencies to be used as legal tender within Zimbabwe. I'm actually the ambassador for one of the charities who delivers funds to its direct funding from individuals to a school, and as of today we can no longer use those funds. If we had a blockchain currency, that would not be an issue. As it stands right now, we've got money sitting in a bank, can't get there. So that is an issue that government can be involved in. Is it happening? Yes, it is in small, agile nations. So
well, we are taking note, as I keep saying, the reason we are here is because we are taking note. Never enough time, as always, ladies and gentlemen, for those that you are regular attenders, know that we could probably go on for hours and hours more. But the one thing I would like to say is thank you for all attending. There is that opportunity to outside the room for you to meet each other, talk to each other and discuss this even further. But from all of us, I'd just like everyone to put their hands together for our panellists.